Oh, she's on the other screen here. Yeah, there she is. Hi, Katie. Uh, as Emily said, I was asked to introduce Katie because I was the one that asked her to be the juror, and we're extremely thankful of it. Unfortunately, the show is only being seen online, but still that doesn't, as I said, doesn't diminish the quality of the show or the insight of choice that Katie brought to it, so that's good. A little background, Katie and I met probably a little less than a year ago, and we're asked to put together an exhibit featuring Jim McGuire's, longtime national photographer Jim McGuire's portrait series to be shown at Belmont's Lou Gallery, which the fact that we didn't kill anyone is good because the turnaround time on that was extremely fast, but it was done kind of prior to the premiere of Ken Burns' country music documentary, which Belmont had a big hand in too. I will add, just because it's worth knowing, Katie's academic credentials, she has a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Belmont and a Master of Fine Arts from the University of South Carolina in Columbia. She also received a grant scholarship funding to study and exhibit in Italy at the International Center for Arts and watch me butcher this word, Monte Castello de Bibbio. Cool. And after completing her master's, she also received an arts residency at the Morris Graves Foundation in California, among other honors. She has exhibition experience in galleries and museums in Arkansas, California, Missouri, New York, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Italy. Or if Nick D'Antona was here, it'd be Italy. But anyway, she continues to practice her art and currently serves as director of galleries and is a full-time lecturer at Belmont University. I am again very thankful to the effort she did in choosing these and for even agreeing to do it. So very proud of you. And if I had a mic, I'd go in, here's Katie, but I'll just say it's all you now. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Good evening, Snap. I'm sure we all hope to meet under different circumstances. This is certainly not how I envisioned this happening, but I am thankful to have the platform and opportunity to share some of my thoughts and insights as I looked at these photographs and made my selections. I'd like to thank Denny Adcock and Emily Pacino specifically for this opportunity. It was such an honor to be invited as the juror for this year's Portals and Passageways exhibition. There were nearly 175 submissions, and it was quite a challenge to limit my selection to only 32 photographs for inclusion in this show. I'm gonna screen share. Uh-oh, I can't screen share. Emily, I've been disabled.
Uh-oh, how did that happen?
I don't know.
Let's see, I'm gonna make you the host.
Okay.
See if that'll work. Make Katie the meeting host? Yeah.
I am now the host.
Will that work? Did that do it?
Yes, that did it.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so back to what I was saying. Yes. So to begin this process, I took great consideration of the prospectus's outlined thematic description. With this in mind, work was asked to, and I quote, explore the nuances of portals, doors, gates, openings, passages, or connections between places or moments. Images might range from identifiable objects to more subliminal abstract images reflecting the photographer's interpretation of the theme, end quote. Furthermore, it was expressed that the intention was to explore transitions between space and time with thresholds that may be concrete or implied. And this particular specificity strikes a strong chord within myself. The notions of time and space I find quite fascinating. Interestingly, I was immediately reminded of a film that many of you may be familiar with, Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Through a juxtaposed imagery and composition, Kubrick examines the complexities of time and space from social, biological, psychological, and spiritual perspectives. Furthermore, he does so with such an excellent attention to detail, particularly as it relates to light and color. He was able to effectively manipulate a physical environment to evoke intense immaterial emotions and meaning, from, Hal's brilliant, bright red camera light embodying the potential evils of technology, to that epic gray-green room at the end of the film where astronaut David's whole life passes under a veil of timelessness. Continuing to consider the exhibit's selection process, I was also inspired by the elaborately curated images of Gregory Crewdson, most specifically his Twilight series, which is set in a suburban environment. These compositions explore the psychological underlayer of the American vernacular. They feel simultaneously realist and surrealist, contemporary and nostalgic. They evoke a great sense of wonder and anxiety, which I'm particularly drawn to. The series is named for the twilight hour, the time of which the images are all set. And Crewdson was drawn to this particular moment in time because it's when both artificial and natural light are possible. Intricately staged in every detail, Crewdson generates unique portals for the viewer to enter and navigate through via their own lens of reality, turning each image into a classic sort of what here doesn't quite belong situation. In doing so, he consistently prompts one to question the societal imposed constructs that craft our own narratives. And finally, sculptor Richard Serra, he's very preoccupied with the physicality of space, if you're unfamiliar with his work. Serra's most notably known for his large experiential sculptures made up of serpentine ribbons of hot-rolled steel. 8 such works, collectively titled The Matter of Time, which hopefully you can see here, were permanently installed in the Guggenheim Museum Bilboa in 2018. This work, like many of his others, creates passages of space that are distinctly different, narrow and wide, compressed and elongated, modest and towering, but always unanticipated. They're really interesting spaces to physically encounter, and the mood changes as you transition between those spaces. I hope these 3 examples provide each of you with a greater sense of aesthetic and conceptual reference point from which I was approaching the selection process for this show. Each submission was not only considered within this framework, but they were also critiqued with particular regard to strength in composition and implementation of the visual elements and principles of design, paying particular attention to that manipulation of line, shape, space, value, form, texture, and color. There are so many incredible images submitted. And like I said, only 32 were selected, which you can hopefully get a clear sense of here. It's so unfortunate that we can't be in a physical space seeing these images on the walls. I was really looking forward to seeing them collectively together, but this will suffice for us. While the process was challenging, it forced me to be exceedingly critical when it came to the previously addressed considerations, and the resulting selections are demonstrations of excellent photography, both masterfully composed and meaningfully connected to the exhibit's visions to emanate portals and passageways. Now I'd like to move through each selected photograph, and I'll speak briefly on the strengths of each image, but I want this to be as meaningful and relevant as possible to your individual needs. And if there are any questions or comments that you would like to share in order to propel the conversation forward, please do not hesitate to speak up. You can type in the box, though I'm going to be looking at this Dropbox file. So if I miss something that's posted, please feel free to voice aloud that comment or question. And of course, if the photographer is present, please share more on your composition. I would especially love to hear more about these images. In no particular order, just moving down the line, when I went through and made my curatorial selection, these were identified by number sequence. I had no access to the photographer's name or the title of the works either. So it's been illuminating to go back through these and review the titles and get more of a sense of, in many cases, place and sort of atmospheric intent behind the photographer. So this piece here, titled Icelandic Passage, I would presume is taken in Iceland. If Bill Lindsley is here, perhaps he can confirm that. I loved this image. It was really interesting for a number of reasons, including the space itself. It's obviously a very special, interesting, unusual location. And not only do you have these circular openings that give you two completely different images to kind of take in, specifically considering the top smaller circle almost appears to have a completely different color palette than the rest of the image. It becomes so warm and almost heavenly, whereas the larger circle feels so much cooler and cold, and there's a very grounded sense of space there. But even more so than that is the texture that makes up this rock formation. It starts to take on the appearance of the surface of water, which I found particularly striking in terms of its textural juxtaposition. You have the nice soft clouds against this very smooth, slick water / rock-like surface, and then the soft powdery snow. And then this nice pop of magenta that comes through on the two individuals that are set on the ground plane. I thought it was a very, very well constructed and unique photograph. Is Bill here? No, Bill. Okay. Well, I love the photo, Bill. Moving on to the second piece by Al Wood, Strollering Down Live Oak Avenue. Beautiful panoramic shot here, gorgeous one-point perspective. The organic lines that kind of curvaceously form this vaulted ceiling over this exterior expanse, I thought was just quite majestic and enchanting. If the branches weren't so interwoven with one another, I don't think it would be as successful as it is. But also the light that's captured at this time of day presents such a fantastical sort of atmosphere, which I was very taken by. The photographer allows you to enter the space in a very inviting way. Is Al Wood with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Mr. Wood. Would you like to share any more on this moment?
I'm not sure what to say. This is made at Wormslow State Historic Site in Georgia. And I'm not sure why this lady was there, because it's about a mile down to the parking place that's near the visitor center. So I don't know what she was doing, but she was pushing this little kid along. I don't know if she was just getting her exercise or what, but this is Live Oak Avenue. At the very end of it, it's the ruins of a tabby building, which was the oldest plantation in the state of Georgia.
That's very interesting. There's also this notion with her pushing the child. this call to time. I mean, the element of time is ever present here as she moves back into that space, and it certainly speaks, I think, to the history and life of Georgia. It's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Next up, we have Denny Adcock's image. Up, said with exclamation mark. Which is interesting because I was not entirely certain that I was looking up when I selected this photograph. Certainly an emphasis on geometry here with the concentric circles formed by the stones that are leading our eye up towards those clouds and onto the ground plane. I also really enjoyed the contrast of the clarity that's provided through the opening, but then this darker, questionable, more ambiguous circle that's off to the side, that I guess would be on the side of this well-like dwelling. Where are we, Denny?
I have this fascination with old abandoned iron smelting places, most of which have been closed since 1880s. I don't recommend this, but I crawled inside of one and photographed up. And it was just pretty fascinating that there's grass growing up there and just the structure of it. And yes, the circle you can't see my hand moving, to the left, that opening, without that, it would have just been not that interesting, I didn't think so.
Absolutely, it would have been too monotonous, right? But no, it adds a great element of balance and intrigue to the sense of place. I mean, there's certainly an ambiguity here that is very inviting and curious, inspires curiosity.
Yeah, it was kind of Rabbit's View or Alice in Wonderland or something type feeling, everything. And I must admit, I seldom name my photographs, so the word up was a last minute, like, oh, I got to come up with something. So
there's also a sense of fleshiness in a way that comes through with these, I guess they're stacked stones.
yes.
Yeah, the way the light is hitting, particularly the bottom of the picture frame, but I guess that far side, it almost feels as though we're going through an organ or something. So seems to be an interesting play on texture there from what's actually being presented and what could be because of the ambiguity of the image.
I do rather like that aspect of things where you're not quite sure what it is you're looking at. So it does sometimes give you pause for more questioning.
It is successful. Durwood Edwards Commandery, Knights Templar, Veor, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, Veor, France. It's interesting to know that this image was taken in France. I was certainly thinking about the stonework I saw in Italy when I spent time in Europe. The vaulted room is it calls to mind such a sort of monastic essence and sense of atmosphere and emotion. But the composition itself struck me here. The line work is very strong. The light is so delicate, and this image is certainly taken at the best moment possible. You can see the light coming in at the top right here, pouring down into the room. And I just love this little perfect square stone piece that's just sitting off in the center, kind of activates the space in a way that I don't think it would be activated otherwise. I very much feel myself entering that space, I think, because of that object existing within it. And there's certainly this invitation towards this very narrow doorway off to the back left. Really, really interesting sense of place, sense of time. There's certainly, due to the nature of the photograph, it feels contemporary, but the imagery itself calling to mind such a nostalgic sense of age and history. Is Durwood with us today?
I think I am.
Hello.
No.
Can you tell us about this space in France?
Well, it was the headquarters of the Knights Templar in Valor, France. And this was the kitchen. And there was a sign outside, and my very limited French took me quite a while to translate it. When I went back out, I said, "Oh, it says beware of falling rock." But I have several shots of this room, and they're all different. And it was just a beautiful room. And it was very, very dark in there. There was a large window over on the left-hand side. You can see where the archway is kind of broken there and flattened out in the top left-hand corner. There was a window there that also put in a little light, but I kind of manipulated it in post-processing to emphasize the light coming in.
You did a wonderful job with that lighting. It's very, very well balanced.
And I love the shape of the doorway. If you'll notice, the bottom is narrower for about 6 inches.
Yeah, right there.
It's a very, very delicate architectural feature.
And the way the stone is starting to crumble towards the top of that wall, as opposed to the more sturdy surrounding area, is pretty interesting as well. There is this element of trepidation, I think, and vulnerability that's also suggested.
It was a very interesting space.
I can see that. I'm envious. Now I want to visit.
Just drive on over.
Perhaps not tomorrow. Once I feel a
was
little more comfortable traveling.
There was no charge for this. It was just a site that you drive up to, get out, and self-guide your own tour. It was very inconspicuous place. It wasn't very well advertised. Just stumbled across it one afternoon driving around.
Very interesting space. And a kitchen. I find that very interesting. All right,
The
thank you.
opposite wall had the fireplace, I assume, where the cooking was done. Very large fireplace.
Thank you, Durwood Edwards. Let's see where we are. Okay. I will keep talking with you. So this image that you took at the Tennessee State Capitol, I absolutely love the choice for black and white here. I think it serves the texture of the space as well as the light very well. It seems to have transformed the marble into almost a wood grain. So the surface texture becomes rather ambiguous. The value and light are really impeccable here. The way you're able to capture the subtle striations on the forefront column here on the far left, I thought was very impressive. And there's a lovely sense of space pulling our eye down that hall through linear perspective. And the texture as well of the vaulted ceiling is a nice contrast too to the more intricacies that are happening on the walls. Just very striking image.
Yeah, the light was surprisingly perfect.
You caught it at the right time.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go back and do it again, but chances are not very likely to appear like that anymore.
Time to explore new spaces. Thank you. Emily Helms' Summer Cottage. The color here is just so whimsical and fun, and the saturated teal green against that red door are so just brilliant and a feast for the eyes, I think, at least for my palette, it strikes home, balanced against the neutral, more browns that are occurring in that panoramic horizontal window or mirror, and maybe a mirror that's placed just behind that door. And the little spots of color too, to break up the intensity of those complementary green and reds, the yellows on the birds that are decorating the wall, and the spots of leaves that are speckling the floor, those reds, oranges, yellows, and pinks. Just a beautiful, beautiful image. Certainly took me back to a sense of childlike wonder, fairy tales. Certainly want to walk through that door and see what's happening on the other side, see if I can find some mystical creatures or something. Is Emily Helms with us?
Nope.
No, Emily. Well, what an interesting space. Also very well balanced, well composed. I really like that the door has been kind of cut off frame and kind of further enhances that invitation into the space for the viewer to come in and explore thoroughly. Really interesting high ceiling too, that kind of, I think, echoes that childlike mentality in terms of being in a space and being very much reminded of how small you are in that grander space, both physical and intangible, emotional. It's like being in a church in the presence of something greater than yourself. Emily Piscino's Evening Fog. I know Emily is with us today. This image, I loved the softness, the sense of atmosphere that was able to be captured through this sense of fog that's starting to kind of mask where the end of that pier or dock actually exists. I also really enjoyed the contrast between those soft, subtle value transitions and the harder slickness of the wooden floor, or not the floor, but the wooden walkway itself. It was a very kind of luscious contrast that was being created there. And I liked that the space was activated in this case with the figure coming towards us. Certainly gave a sense of placement and activity to an otherwise isolated scene. Without that figure there, I think it would have taken on a little more of a haunted, darker sort of emotional stance than it does with this figure. With the placement of the figure, it feels more nostalgic. It feels more inviting. Emily?
Yes, that was up in Maine, and it was a walkway between one part of the island and another part of the island. And of course the fog was just fabulous. Before that figure came up, I probably had a couple dozen photos, different angles of just the walkway and the fog and the bay and so forth. But man, when he came walking along, I mean, that was just like great timing. It really does not seem at all the same without a figure walking.
I absolutely agree. It would just take on a completely different sense. Mood. Fog has such an easy way of coming across kind of a dark mystery and the unknown.
Cloud of unknowing. Yes.
That's right. But with
we're living right now.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's a beautiful image. So this image by Gerald Fiegel, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Feigl, Abduction. I am not typically drawn to blurred images, but this one I found incredibly striking. The use of light is very inviting. There is this element of memory, I think, that is really striking home with me here with that manipulation of the blurred lines and the lack of crisp detail that aids in the narrative that's suggested. I also really enjoyed the strong geometry, which does kind of stabilize the otherwise agitated imagery that's happening. So those nice strong verticals along the wall, and then even the ceiling has been broken up into very flat planes to form that curve. Really, really nice sense of space that's been suggested here. And the vignetting, that dark right side as well, just draw your eye in to the activity within the figures, and certainly give you a sense of a movement into that space. Can you tell us more, Gerald?
You make the image sound a lot better than I was thinking it might be when I took it. It was long ago, back when I used to only use digital cameras, which I don't really do much anymore. And it was in Montana near the North Dakota border in a tunnel that I think there was a railway, maybe a mine nearby. And the family was just walking ahead. There was, I think, the two boys way up in the front, and that's my wife, Sarah. And frankly, you know, I was using a pretty mediocre digital camera that couldn't handle the low light, and it was a slow shutter. So the blur is just the slow shutter, and you're not working with the tripod. So it was just one of a series that I did, kind of like just snapshots that, and you know, so yeah, it was kind of accidental in a way. And, you know, I forgot I even had these images, but for this show, I said, oh, you know what? I remember those way back 10, 15 years ago. And I pulled them out, and it was one of the more literal interpretations of the theme. So I threw it in. So, but I really appreciate your comments. It makes it sound like it was better planned than it was.
What a successful, happy accident. It certainly worked.
There you have it. No, thank you.
I did interpret the figure that I believe is your wife as a younger girl, which is interesting to know that it is actually a woman, but because of how far off in the distance she is, and she's wearing a dress, and it's moving so organically, yeah, kind of came off more. I guess I also probably associated myself with the figure.
Yeah. No, this is actually more of the kind of shot that she would have done, because she's really much into using Holga cameras, for example, or and going for the more ambiguous, you know, blurred out, you know, a look. So anyway, yeah, no. And by the way, your comments in general so far have been fantastic. I've been really enjoying listening to you comment. So.
Thank you, Gerald. Beautiful photo.
Thank you.
Janice Tomanek's Rise Up. What a spectacular balance of geometry. I do not know where this space is, but I want to go there. I love the yellow and orange colors playing off of one another with the very soft kind of boiled egg yolk green stairs climbing from the center of the sort of Fibonacci spiral up around and out towards the foreground. I'm assuming we haven't traveled all the way up to the top of this tower space. I'm not sure, but it's certainly just it's such a well-balanced image. Great use of line. I'm sure that there are many different images that could be taken in this space, but I appreciate the symmetrical balance of the photo. I found it very satisfying. Is Janice with us? Well, it is just such a fun image to look at. I find my eye continuing to kind of crawl from the center around and back down and around. Such a great sense of movement that's suggested with those repetitious lines. And the light, clearly, this has been caught on at the right time of day. Nothing too glaring, no area seems to be blown out. And I appreciate the shadows, the darkening on the left side, as opposed to the rest of the image that does appear to be far more illuminated. Really, really great sense of balance here. Joe Field's facade. Certainly playing to my childlike sense of wonder. I was immediately taken to the secret garden and wanting to go through those gates and find some fairy village that existed beyond. I loved the juxtaposition of those ornate linear elements in the iron gate against the more blocky, geometric, concrete stone columns on either side. It's surrounded by this just luscious greenery. In terms of being invited into the image, the fact that the gate itself is slightly ajar, I certainly don't think the image would hold as much interest if it were closed. So noting that particular movement of the gate was very important to making the photograph successful to me. And I'm sure through editing, the color palette, everything just has this overwhelming sense of nostalgia and storybook fable like feeling. I just loved it, especially into this theme. Is Joe with us?
Yes.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. This gate is over off of Franklin Road, and I've driven past it several times and have stopped and taken photographs a couple of times. But this particular time, I just loved the way the grass was all grown up, and it's, there's a bunch of grass, and I just find it fascinating that I called it facade because it was this front to this unknown background. You didn't know what was back there. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little too shy to go back there because, it's somebody's property. There's a for sale sign there, so I didn't feel like I should go on there. But I did feel it was interesting. I had never thought of the secret garden reference, and that's one of my favorite stories. So it's interesting. That must have been there in my mind somewhere. But I just loved that it was sort of this opening to nowhere, this imposing gate, and yet there's nothing back there, Anyway.
Except overgrowth of nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, it's a beautiful photograph. I'm glad you're able to capture that moment.
Thank you.
Yes. Kay Ramming's Beyond the Doors. So this image, I was refreshed to see something that was relying so heavily on light and really playing with our interpretation of the reality of what we were seeing. Thinking back to the monolith of 2001's A Space Odyssey, there's this presence that is suggested with this large illuminated rectangle that feels rather feminine with its smaller windows up top here. There's such a personality that's suggested within this reflection that is, I found, very intriguing. It's easy to distinguish that we are looking at a reflected light coming through, I'm presuming, coming through a glass door onto this stone tiled floor that's been beautifully polished, creating an almost mirror-like surface. It also started to take on a bit of a painterly quality too. I am a painter myself and do tend to gravitate towards, in some cases, that aesthetic. So yeah, this one, I appreciated how different the photographer approached the concept, considering how they internalized portals and passageways. Is Kay with us? Oh, no Kay. Oh,
No, she's here.
oh, Kay.
Kay, just unmute. See if we can help Kay unmute.
There. Okay, I'm here.
Hello, Kay.
Hi. Thank you so much I really appreciate your comments. Those are the glass doors from Cheekwood going into the mansion.
Okay.
And I just saw it. I used to work there, and I was probably sitting at the information desk, and the little rectangular doohickeys up there in the door are the handles.
Mm-hmm.
I just liked all the lines and the angles, and that's all.
It's so interesting. I mean, it's yeah.
Well, sometimes I think you just see a shot.
Mm-hmm.
You just see what the image can be. At least I do. And this is pretty much exactly what I saw. There's hardly any, there's no manipulation to it, because I don't know how to do that. I can barely unmute this thing.
Well, it's a very successful image, and I love that the light is able to capture, and this is what I'm speaking about when I suggest the painterliness of it. The way it's picking up the broken roughness of the surface of those tiles is just gorgeous, especially on the bottom two reflecting areas. You get more of the subtle undulations of the surface itself, which is very satisfying.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another by Kay, schools closed, taking on new meaning in this day.
Yeah.
I did not select it with today's mindset, but there was such a strong sense of nostalgia, not only with regard to space, but the strong sense of one point perspective, pulling your eye down those monotonous rows of lockers that's only echoed by the tiles and the color of the tiles that just draws that line right back into the far center. It certainly took me back to my own school days, and that sense of drudgeriness, I think, like just the monotony and drudgery of doing the same routine in that space day after day. And the light is very nice, very successful. That sense of color is very balanced in the image. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry if you hear my cat back here.
All right.
This is the locker hallway at St. Cecilia.
Okay.
I work there, and it was. I'm there at the end of the day, and so there was nobody there. And I initially was going to call this "Schools Out for Summer," but as it turned out, "Schools Closed" was more appropriate.
It sure was.
But I love the length of it, the way it just kind of keeps going, and I just liked it.
Very, very successful, especially for the thematic content of the show.
Thank you.
But like I said, I mean, it's not just the image, because that hall is so long and it's so repetitive on either side. It literally takes me into that mindset of like how
the only thing I did actually to this was I did make it a little darker, because it is lighter in person, but it just had an eerier feeling to it.
It does. I think the vignetting helps, and it helps echo that length in the hallway for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Manson's all
Katie?
aboard. Yes.
Katie, can I interrupt just a second? We just got a comment from Kimberly Petty Emmerich. She's just a couple of slides up ahead. She has to leave pretty soon. Can you go to her and then come back to Kimberly Manson?
I would be happy to. And she is this
There
one?
she is. Yes.
All right. Hello, Kimberly. Petty Emmerich. Go ahead.
Hey.
Hi. I really enjoyed this image. It had a very steampunk-like feel. And interestingly, I liked how closed off it was, kind of similar to thinking about Kay's reflected light on the flat surface of the floor. There's something very inviting about what is happening behind these two doors, these two drawers. Well, I guess it's 4 drawers. Very balanced imagery, great geometry. I appreciated the more subdued color palette too. Imagining if these bricks had more saturation, I don't think it would be as compelling of an image, but it's also playing off of that sense of nostalgia for me as well, not only with the line work, but also the color palette, absolutely. So where is this? This space?
It's actually at the Holocaust Memorial in
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, that gives it so much more life.
It was very it definitely makes you stop, and when you're there to and of course it's in a huge room, but I guess I was put in a place where I just kept thinking, if you're standing there, that's all you're going to see. And so that's all I wanted in the photo, because that's all you would be focused on if you were there. So it draws you in.
It absolutely draws you in.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what it is certainly kind of changes the image for me a bit, but in a far more interesting way. I had read this on more of a well, I guess it is in a way a furnace, but oh my goodness, I'm just gonna have to take that in for a while, Kimberly.
I have to say, it is the type of thing I thought of when I saw it, and I've never been there.
Yeah, it's
overwhelming.
Yeah, it can definitely put you in a frame of mind that's hard to get out of sometimes, walking through there. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now thinking of the context and the theme here, what an excellent choice for inclusion. That certainly will make you stop and reflect for some time.
Yeah, sorry it's such a downer.
That's all right. That's all right.
But, it is something that, you just never want to forget.
And with that in mind, the way that you have taken the photo, even you've given it its own border with the metal work, it is so much of a statement piece. It's very bold and striking, very striking that way.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing it with us, Kimberly. Okay. The other Kimberly Manson. Is Kimberly Manson with us?
Yep.
I am.
Excellent. Hello, Kimberly.
Hi.
So this particular image, I loved the color play. It certainly took me to Mondrian immediately, between the color and the emphasis on all the linear elements. I loved the way that the image had been composed. It's very well balanced. I love that you included the platform as well. So you get that nice transition from like the canary yellow into more of the school bus yellow that's on the actual steps, which invite you up into this train or subway, wherever whichever form of transportation this is. And I love the subtle red bar in the center as well. It's just very well constructed, composed, and ultimately had a very fun sense of invitation that was elicited. I wanted to watch my step and get aboard for sure and go somewhere new. Where were you here, Kimberly?
We were downtown Nashville. We had been to a Titans game, and this is the Nashville Star that takes you from downtown Nashville back to several stops in Donaldson and Hermitage and Lebanon. So you can take the train to the game instead of driving. And we were parking. Yeah. So I was standing there, and they're like, get on the train, and I'm like, no, we're trying to wait until nobody's standing there. So my husband was like, just tell them, just ignore her. She's so just for a split second, there was nobody there. And I like the colors and the fact that the windows in the back, you see a wall out one window and you see the greenery out the other. And so that was like a passageway to me, and like, where's the train going? So that's why I picked this one.
Excellent choice. And I'm so glad you were able to capture the space with no figures. It certainly would take on a completely different connotation without it. I love the emphasis on all the linear elements. There's such great interplay of vertical, horizontal, and diagonals with no distractions from individuals occupying the space. Very nice.
Thanks.
Another one of yours, Beyond the Shadows. This was just a very interesting, lovely moment, I felt. Great interplay of light. I loved that the window was being held open and you can see the transitions of shadow that are coming through the aged panes of glass. I also really loved this little curl that's coming down from the top of the frame, and kind of guiding our eye through the really deep dark shadow into the more subtle gradual transitions into shadow, which then kind of draw our eye into this vine work that's coming down the side and then back up into the window. All of the linear elements are pulling our eye towards this dark interior, and I'm thinking this might be a little bird sitting on the windowsill or something something of that nature. That's occupying that space. Can you tell us more about that?
I was actually doing the Scott Kelby photo walk in Nolensville, Tennessee, and we had just began the photo walk, and it was early in the morning. The sun was high in the sky, shadows really bright, and it was a group of photographers just trying to, capture what's going on in this little town in Tennessee. And I passed by this building and I heard music coming from the building, and I looked up, and that's what made me look up at the window. And I was like, wow, look at the shadows. Everybody else is taking pictures of the same stuff. And I'm like, whoa, look at that. So I was like, that's for me. And I continued on the photo walk. And then I don't know, something about this image. I just love the shadows and the way it almost looks black and white because of the harsh light, but that's really a color photo. And so, yeah.
Absolutely.
And it just feels like like you could feel, it was so hot that day just being there. And so you could imagine it being hot inside this building and the breeze coming through this window. So that's kind of what it spoke to me. But I think it's a repair shop, like an automotive. The bottom part is kind of like a garage, the top part of a garage. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I completely neglected to mention what you just stated, which was, yes, when you look at it at first glance, it reads almost as a neutral black and white, or at least highly desaturated image. But then when your eye catches that deep green vine, you start to see those pops of color that occur throughout. Very nice, very visually interesting. Thank you.
Katie, while you're going to the next photo, I want to do a time check with the group.
Okay.
Okay, we're halfway through the photos, and we're not strict about finishing up at 8 o'clock on the dot. Do you want her to dash through the rest of the photos? Do you want
I'll be happy to
People
dash.
having to leave, are we okay with just,
I can move through them, and then I'd be happy to.
I don't want to shortchange people, but I don't want people to have to leave either. So maybe I'm not seeing anything in anybody's comments, so I think we're fine.
Okay.
Oh, I did see one. She's fine. All right. So, all right.
Excellent. I think this is the final one submitted from, or selected from Kimberly. I loved this image. This is the only image I selected that was more focused on figurative representation than the actual space, or emphasis on light, etc. In consideration of the topic at hand here, I just loved this interpretation of the baptism with regard to passageway into a sort of moment of transcendence, kind of moving from one phase of life into the next. I also, in terms of texture in the image, was really struck by how crisp and clean the lines of the figure above the surface of the water are, in contrast to the image that is submerged, and how she becomes blurred, and you get this very real sensation of the bubbles occurring on the surface of the water, the movement of the water. Just a very satisfying image, and I'm so pleased that it was done in black and white. It just adds to this sense of age within the tradition, within the what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, it will come to me. I apologize. Kimberly, anything you'd like to add?
I mean, this is one that I had because I take a lot of photographs at my church. And when there is a baptism, if I'm there, I usually try to get a couple of shots, but there was just something different about this one. And I thought it fit the theme for a transition. So
It's a beautifully crafted and composed image. You did a lovely job. Very balanced. Great sense of texture and light throughout. Thank you.
thank you.
We've already addressed this piece. Leslie Gill's socks. Again, color. That lapis lazuli blue on the shades, and coming through on the on the terrace as well. We're just a beautiful pop of color amidst the more neutral kind of beige facade and the yellow ochre of the rest of the wooden facade, and actually maybe metal. Just really interesting, fun use of color, fun play with composition as well. It's an interesting perspective, the way that it crops on the top and the bottom. I found that to be a bit unusual. We have very little information given on the left and right of this balcony area, and it's made very clear that the focus here is on color and line. I appreciated it. And of course you have the fun socks hanging and drying in the sun. Is Leslie Gill with us?
Yeah, here I am.
Hello, Leslie.
Hi.
Can you tell us more about this image?
Yeah, so I took this image in Old Havana in Cuba. It was part of I took it as part of a photo workshop that I was doing in Cuba. And one of the things that fascinated me about Old Havana was the way that people use these balconies of these old colonial houses to dry their clothes. So it was very interesting to me to look at the laundry and then imagine who the people behind the laundry were on the other side of the doors.
Yes. I absolutely feel that. Whose feet occupied these socks?
Right.
Thank you, Leslie. Michelle Claire Bayer's Ocean Door. I loved the emphasis on symmetry, that intense linear perspective, drawing your eye down into the illuminated end of this pier that's gone out into the ocean. I really liked also that the steam or fog that's coming off of the water is very shallow. It's not overwhelming the image. There's still a very clear sense of horizon, a lovely subtle play within the clouds as well. I found that very restrained. I appreciated the restraint there in terms of the moment that was able to be captured. And you also have that lovely transition from the very soft, almost airbrushed seeming fog covered areas, and then the closer you get to the foreground, you're able to see that rippled water surface, greatly contrasting the geometric hard edged columns that are holding up the pier. Just a really enlightening and inviting image. Is Michelle with us?
Nope.
No, Michelle. Okay. Well, lovely image. Another by, I'm assuming this is a female, by her as well, Point Reyes. I was very intrigued by the space, but also the moment of day that was captured as well. Moving down this serpentine, very narrow and contained walkway to the point of interest down here on Point Reyes. I love that the fog produced this very gradual transition from a bright white in the top of the picture plane, and then softly faded so gradually into that soft value transition, finally folding into the clear seabed there. Really nice. Great composing here. I appreciated the balance in terms of capturing this right rock facade and not cutting off too much or including too much. Very inviting. Mike Gannon's Into the Light. This one caught my attention pretty immediately. Another example of that kind of painterly aesthetic being evoked here. I also really appreciated how in this case the figure was actually in the shadow, or the figures were actually in the shadow, and the doorway or the passageway was actually illuminated and the figures walking towards it. Just a really interesting sense of contemporary passage. This feels very, very grounded in our own reality. You can make out the surrounding areas. It's easily identifiable. But the way that the image had been manipulated and the way the light had been interpreted, I found that particularly interesting. Is Mike with us?
I am here.
Hello.
I would like to say this is one that I worked very hard on. This is one of those that I actually took it with what they call a Google Clip, which was a little camera that was activated by motion. And the purpose that I had it there was to see what the dog did during the day. And I forgot about it. But this picture showed up, and I just really did like the simplicity of kind of walking to the light and the feel of that. And so there is some post-processing here to kind of bring out the simplicity of what I was trying to say.
Well, I appreciate it. I found it rather interesting. I'm glad you were able to capture that. The dog moved.
Yeah.
All right, Monty Arnold's Heads Bowed. So when I saw this image, I was immediately taken to my experience in Italy. When I stayed there, I was at Monte Castello di Vibbio, which was located in Umbria, which is the only landlocked area in the country. I was surrounded by fields of sunflowers. It was such a beautiful and vast expanse of these growing fields. So when I saw this image, there was a great sense of nostalgia for me. But there's also this reverence that's demanded from sunflowers, especially in the state of decay, when they start drying out, losing their leaves, etc. There's such a personality. There's such a figurative presence. I mean, these big heads on tall stems. You can't help but kind of identify with them in a rather human way. So when I saw this image, it felt so occupied. It felt so inviting, and almost like I was in a sort of sacred space. There was a sort of sacredness that was certainly called forth in the number of sunflowers that were occupying the space. That heavy emphasis on the vertical element with these heavy tops. And I loved that there was also this open front left sort of walkway. I'm not sure if it's a beaten path or not, but it certainly reads from this vantage point as though the viewer is being invited into the photograph. So I found that one to be really interesting as well. Is Monty with us?
I am.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well.
This was taken in Provence, so it's getting close to Italy.
Yes.
And I was struck by the fact that it almost had a monochromatic appearance to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, as you stated, the almost a reverential feel to it. And the reason I entered it was because of the transition or the passageway. Every form of life goes from life to death in some form, and at some time, and even the plant life does the same. And I thought there was a sense of reverence there that spoke to me.
I think it absolutely comes across, and that's a great interpretation of the idea of passing time and life, and through decay comes new life.
True.
Thank you so much, Monty. And another of yours, Reverent Reflections. What a great captured reflection. I was very taken by how well you were able to concentrate on the vibrant color that's obviously happening behind our vantage point, and that sense of ambiguity that's occurring on the window panes. I'm intrigued to know more about what's going on behind the window in reality versus this kind of skewed reality that we've been given. I also love I'm a sucker for an old window. So great, there's a great element of texture that's coming across in the aged cracking and algae or moss that's starting to form on the weathered pane. They're very successful.
Well, this was taken in a little town along the Mississippi near Natchez called Rodney, Mississippi. And it's basically a ghost town. There are a couple of churches and a handful of houses, and that's about it. And I wanted to go in the church, and it was padlocked and had signs up not to try to enter. So I just walked around, and it happened to be that most of the windows were so high I couldn't look in them, but this one on one side I was able to look in, and I happened just to catch enough of what I could see inside with the podium or the pulpit and a bit of the pews, and then the reflection of the outside of the windows, and then try to focus on the frailness or the deterioration of the window panes themselves. So it kind of lends to this portal passageway type thing, I think, as well.
It's very interesting. There's so much to take in and interpret. You could stay with it for a very long time, which is another very successful element, in my opinion, of any photograph is that that attention that it demands in terms of deciphering the complexities of the imagery.
Well, a side note, I had never touched this image in the computer until the call for the SNAP entry came, and I got to thinking about what I had and went back and looked at some of the things I had, and I thought, well, this kind of speaks to me. So this was really the first time I had tried to do anything with it.
Well, it's lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Renee Lowry's Crosses. There were a few of these that I think are layered images that I had reviewed in the selection process, and this one especially I found moving and meaningful. The way this galaxy cluster has been imposed into the sky, aiding into the celestial aspect of the interpretation of the imagery. Beautiful illumination on the crosses and stone tombstones. I love I'm sure this hasn't been placed, but the placement of the fence that seems to be deteriorating and starting to break down. Just a beautiful image. I really enjoyed the depth here, and was very pleased that it was rendered in black and white as opposed to trying to incorporate color here. The reduction of color is very successful. Is Renee with us?
Nope.
No, Renee? Well, that's a shame. Sandy Burr's Leaving. This image took me to Dorothea Lange, the Depression era images, in a nostalgic way. I mean, the structure itself is certainly run down. There's this great emphasis on texture of the beaten wood grain surface, as well as the kind of overgrown in the actual yard, and then flat bed in the back. Looks like we're amidst a farmland. But in this particular image, the way that this bright white curtain is moving through the wind, it activates the space in a way that it would absolutely not, in a way that it absolutely would not have without it. Without this particular pop of white to kind of add life and breath to the otherwise more monotonous, drab heaviness of the image, is very successful and adds a lot of interest and life to it. Is Sandy with us?
I am. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
This was taken down in the Delta. It was an old shack along the side of the road. It was just kind of compelling, and other people here will recognize this image as well.
Is that right?
Yes. I think a few of us have some version of this image.
I
But
see.
it was my first time down in the Delta, and it was a real eye-opening trip.
The Delta is a very special place. And it's interesting. I mean, I can absolutely understand that it is in the Delta and that sense of place is present, but it also has a sort of Midwestern feel as well in the way that you've captured the space. Thank you so much, Sandy. Another of yours, The Approach. I love this image for a number of reasons. First and foremost, because I was able to enter 2 passageways. I was not only invited into this first left door, but I love that you can also follow the space even further back into this narrow passageway here. And the variety of texture and value, very deep, rich value here that you were able to gather in the multiple surfaces, the degrading surfaces. Very successful, beautiful image.
This was taken at a historic hotel down in Columbia. Other people in the group have shot there as well, I'm sure. It had some use during the Civil War, and then it was closed, and you had to kind of find somebody to let you in. So mostly I was taken by the texture on the walls, and the light was just perfect at that time.
Absolutely. And I like the triangle sliver that's also coming in and breaking up the flatness of the wall. I think that is aiding to your advantage in terms of making this space even more complex and interesting. Thank you. And the way of salvation. So this piece, very symmetrical, I enjoyed the balance between geometric and organic here. There's a great sense of linear occupancy in terms of defining the structure, the surface of the door, but then the way this ivy is swooping down, which then is paralleled on the opposite side by this more linear swoop, which is then also interpreted here on the doors. I'm not sure if that's actually a wire. It might be a wire, not necessarily a vine, but I love that there was this black background, illuminated organic line work against the door, and then the opposing interpretation that was happening on the outside. I found that very, very interesting and satisfying. And then that kind of implied linear element down the center was also really nice, with the spots of illumination that seemed to be coming through at the back of the structure. And then these, I'm assuming they're hanging light bulbs from the ceiling.
This was also taken in Rodney, Mississippi. It was a town that had been an active port, and then when the Mississippi River changed directions, it became a ghost town. So I'm a sucker for doors. And again, this had really great texture, and I thought that it worked well as a black and white.
It does, and it's beautifully composed as well. You've really balanced the composition, but then the positioning of the doors to be skewed and it's very successful.
Thank you. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Sharon Brown Christopher's Beyond the Veil. Another more painterly image that I found very striking. It felt very intimate, so soft. Very little information is given imagery-wise, but that reduction of identity is kind of plays into the importance of value and color transition. And for me, this image was so much about the transition between warm and cool, and well, opposites in general, really, which allow the sheet that's hanging here to become so luminous. It's so luminous. It almost takes on a sort of iridescent quality. The way that the values shift from a warm tonality into cooler tonalities in the shadow area is very successful and satisfying. And the fact that the same thing happens in the background, but in a more exaggerated way to contrast the subtleties of the cloth is very successful as well. So you have that nice transition of the tan, neutral brown in the bottom, moving up into that brighter, cooler white zone. Very nice image. Is Sharon Brown with us?
Yes, right here.
Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Katie. For me, I was drawn into the whole notion of threshold with this circumstance, and felt as if it were an invitation into liminal space, you know, the space between the no longer and the not yet. Yes. Sort of where we're living as a culture right now, between the no longer and the not yet, which is like in a butterfly transition from caterpillar to butterfly. It's the chrysalis stage where everything becomes liquefied and loose, and so it has something for me to do with being drawn into the future that is unclear and yet beckoning. I think, and moving from one world to another.
That's beautiful, Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing. Beautiful photograph. Susan Hayes, door is open. Come on in. Great sense of nostalgia here, clearly within the palette. I loved the that play of copper and then what we envision the patina on copper to be, that teal emerald sort of bluish green tinge. They play really, really nicely together. There's also a sort of blurring that's occurring within the definition of the door and the door frame, which is really interesting because the handle does appear so defined, crisp, and clear. So in that sense, there's this tangible expectation that we, the viewer, can actually occupy and hold the handle and enter, while the space itself seems to be in a state of shift, a state of change. It was a very interesting image to come across, and I appreciated the compositional space as well. The heavier emphasis on bold line linear elements on the left and the more broken up complexities on the right. Is Susan with us?
I am.
Hello, Susan.
Hello there. The door handle for me was what was the key element of the image, because that's how you enter.
Mm-hmm.
Screen doors are always fascinating for me. I grew up with them. And so it was common to always hear, no matter where my grandmother was in the house and somebody knocked on the door, the response would be, "Come on in, I'm home." And so for me, it's a nostalgic image. It brings back a lot of memories. But the handle is the key. Without the handle, you couldn't enter.
I absolutely agree. It is also what makes the image so successful visually.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Another of yours, Unfiltered Light. I really enjoyed the square frame on this one. I think it matches the composition very well, and that can be a tricky thing to do in a world of Instagram. Not every image needs to be a square, but I think this one is certainly appropriate. The way that the light is peering through this crease in the door and fanning out in these beautiful defined rays is so well contained within the square and complements it very efficiently. I also really enjoyed that every surface was the same material, that same textures coming through, which gives your eye more capability of focusing on the intricacies of the light play and what's actually happening, instead of getting distracted by varying colors or textures. There's textural play, but it's continuous. It's simultaneous throughout the image. And I'm very happy you were able to get such definition and subtle value changes in the door itself, as there is so much bright light coming in through that dark corner. Very nice image.
Well, this was a serendipitous image in that it had been a very heavily clouded day, and all of a sudden the sun broke as we entered this particular building, and you could watch the light travel across the floor. So it was only about a 2-minute happening, but it happened to be in the room when it happened.
That's right, serendipitous moment.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Susan W.N. Ranch, doorway to ? I don't know either. But I really enjoyed the color. The palette is consistent and interesting. I love that the main focus has the composition itself has been halved. I love the inclusion of the bottom of the chair, only because it adds a subtle variation of that kind of yellow-orange color of the wall, and it is so geometric and in complement to the frame that is above it, and all of that line work that's occurring there. I love the way that this rectangle has been mapped out in so many different ways, between the mirror frame itself being broken up into multiple blocks of distinctly defined tiles, and then giving your eye this lovely complementary blue to the yellow bar series, and then the beautiful lattice work that's occurring in the door that's being reflected. Just a really fun, interesting, and well-balanced image here. Is Susan with us?
Yes. She just needs to unmute.
There. Okay. Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Susan.
Hi. I was sitting at lunch with some friends and in their condo, and looked up and saw this. And you know, in the middle of the lunch conversation notwithstanding, I grabbed my cell phone and took this picture. And then I showed it to them. And one of the friends who lives there said, "You know, I have never seen that before."
Wow.
But for me, it was like the sense of going on forever. You don't know where it stops. It could just keep going.
Absolutely. I can see that as well. Yeah. Lovely image. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tamara Stallings Driftwood. So this one I found very interesting. It has an almost Rorschach-ian-like feel to it. You start to interpret the imagery because of the monotonous wood grain, all of these organic parallel lines that are curving around and sometimes into one another, and then the color change that occurs in the center here. You start to kind of identify multiple figures that are interacting with one another in interesting ways. I love trees, I love nature, and I think this is a beautiful moment that can easily go unnoticed that Tamara has identified. Excellent linear elements. Is Tamara with us?
I am.
Hello, Tamara.
Hi. I think what drew me in was the knot hole and what's down in there.
What did you find?
I don't know. It's a mystery.
Well, it's really beautiful. Where did you find this driftwood?
Savannah, Georgia. We were hiking in a marsh, and I can't remember exactly which one.
I see. Well, very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And another of yours, our final piece selected for this show, Time. I think it was maybe the second. I didn't choose many of the layered photos because it's such a fickle manipulation to successfully pull off. And this particular image I thought did it very well, mainly because it serves the brightly lit foliage kind of serves in two capacities for me. Not only does it add this kind of tangible interpretation of time to the clock that's there as well. There's just this lovely pattern that's also been created in terms of breaking up the perfect symmetry of the perfect circle that the predominant imagery is suggesting. Yeah, just very interesting and contemplative. Certainly gave you an interesting series of imageries to consider in the same space, especially with consideration to this topic. Can you tell us more about the layers, Tamara?
Yes, it's a clock that was built by Edison that no longer works. And the image is an accident. I was messing around and I composited it with an aerial shot of trees taken from the top of a lighthouse. And I liked how the trees sort of looked like clouds. Yeah. And I had made this before the show. And then just the whole idea of time as a portal with the clouds, I thought it would work.
I think it does as well. It is an interesting interpretation, and you're right. There's a cloud-like structure to that natural element as well. It's an interesting choice to layer. Thank you so much. I think that is the last image that was selected for the show. I just had an absolute pleasure looking at all of your works, every image that was selected. I can't tell you how challenging it was to actually, I'll be back here, to actually select only 32, but I did what was asked of me. And, and I hope I answered all of your questions too.
I don't want to speak for the entire group, but I will say you did more than answer our questions. You led us down a very re-inspiring path to look at these photos. And I think, well, speaking for myself, I saw more in these photos through this discussion than I might have otherwise. And we all want to thank you for all your work. And we're so sorry it didn't get to hang, but we thank you a lot. And I will say, we are now, you all may or may not have noticed this, but we are now posting one photo a day on Instagram. I don't know, every day, Cy can correct me. Several photos a week, one by one. The show is on Instagram and Facebook. And collectively, the whole show will be on our website pretty darn soon, right?
It's already up there.
Okay, go to our
it's
website.
Up there, and I made it the home page for right now. So there's no trouble finding it.
Yeah. So,
I'm
although
trying
we can't,
to post, at
go
least
ahead.
picture for every 3 days, so we don't run out of pictures in at least 2 months. So I
Yeah.
can post every day, but we would find another way to fill in that space. Get some pictures from the members to post. So if that's an idea, we can pitch in. If we can get some content, we can post it every day.
I think we don't need to speed up your schedule.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
So, and I look forward to the time when we can, gosh, see these in print. Maybe somehow. What do you think?
I think this was awesome, and I am really glad that we were able to do this. Unfortunately, not in person, but thank you very much, Katie. This was great.
Yeah,
absolutely. My pleasure.
Your descriptions were great. Were there any that you maybe thought were like honorable mentions, and that maybe it didn't fit like perfectly into the box, but you thought like you had a thought about them or something?
I'd have to go back through them, to be honest.
That makes sense.
I
And it's
haven't looked
100.
at all, like the ones that weren't selected since March.
Right. I understand.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Seems a lifetime ago.
I mean, I would say all of them. Truly, there was not a bad one in the bunch. It was a very hard selection process. Beautiful photos.
Well, thank you.
Deshaun, that's an excellent question. And as a person who shepherds these photos you all submit to, that we turn into an anonymous file for the juror, time and time again, you think this is enough for 3 great shows. Mm-hmm. And so it's always interesting to hear how the juror, what like your perspective was and what drew you and all our jurors say, another juror might have picked some other ones. Well, that's the darn truth for this group. I'm telling you, everybody is submitting just some fabulous pictures, and maybe we can figure out some way to share the non-selects someday in the group, somehow.
Katie, I have a question.
Absolutely.
What would you suggest? I noticed on your work you do quite a few abstract pictures, that type work. How do you present abstractions for general consideration?
So was this, okay, is this coming out of the question you posted in the chat thread?
Well, it's sort of coming out of it. I think they're related, yes.
Okay. So how do I consider them for sharing with the public?
Right. I mean, I'm having quite a bit of problems right now with all sorts of people, including the Copyright Office, on I've copyrighted abstracts before, but now they're telling me they don't want to do it. So and it seems like that when you branch out into something that's not generally, that's not the general mainstream, that you have a problem in the presentation, so they're considered.
I'm trying to follow you. I've never tried to copyright my paintings, but I'm also working in a different medium than you are. And this is.
And I've also Tennessee Craft does not allow abstracted photographs. It's written in their rules.
Hey, John.
Yes.
This is a great subject for a whole thorough conversation.
Yeah, I think it would be good to
let's table this, if I may. I see people are having to leave, and one by one, we've already kind of gone over maybe people's supper time, late supper or whatever. But let's hold that thought and conclude with great thanks for Katie.
Yeah, she did an excellent job.
Look for everybody. This is fabulous, Katie. We appreciate it so very much, and I look forward to seeing everybody next month. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Katie, it was great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Right. Thanks.